Hello learners, welcome to the session of Human Resource Planning. I am Dr. L.K. Jana, your instructor to this session. In addition to welcoming you to this session, I would like to give you some useful information about learning this session on the topic like HR planning process outline, the time scale of HR forecasts, the workload factors, the different quantitative tools that is used for manpower forecasts, use of the qualitative models in human resource planning for better management decisions. We'll also be going to study about the analysis of manpower supply, specifically the manpower wastage analysis, and also we'll also be touching upon the HR replacement analysis. Let me take you through what is the current scenario. If we see all the developed countries, they are actually facing the crisis of quality manpower. The problem is that acute that the countries, they are looking forward for direct recruitment in developing countries. So I'm here distinctly saying about the developed countries versus the developing countries. Developed countries are facing the crisis, whereas they are looking for direct recruitment from the developing countries. One of the major reasons for such job vacancies in developed countries is attributed to the total failure in their macro level planning. Almost every day in newspaper, we get news clips specifically on downsizing, job cuts, whether it is a IT industry or a banking industry or a finance industry or engineering industry, it is prevalent everywhere. Such redundancy of manpower actually vouches that even at micro level, they are actually not being able to address the problem of skill obsolescence. So therefore, it is interesting to observe that even with acknowledged professionalism, the HR department is unable to adopt a strategic approach of HR, resulting in the culmination of redundancy problem after each annual performance results. Let's introspect on some of the outlines that the HR planning process follows. The HR planning process is actually being delineated into 4 different stages. Stage 1 is called as investigation. At this stage, organization is supposed to develop their awareness about the detailed manpower scenario to derive a holistic view. Holistic view mean that need to be referred the external and internal manpower review while looking their current manpower. Scientific homework at this stage helps to identify the present and future skill gaps. For a better result, SWOT analysis, that is called as the strength, weakness, opportunity and threat analysis, can proceed a cause and effect diagram, and the cause and effect diagram is called as a fishbone diagram, which is very simple to comprehend. Second stage, that is called as forecasting. When we do adequate investigation in the next phase of human resource planning process, analysis of demand and supply of manpower is done. Manpower supply analysis is done considering both the internal and the external supply. While doing the internal supply analysis, we need to focus in terms of career planning and development, succession planning, which is in line with the corporate policies and procedures. Whereas when you are doing an external supply analysis, we are supposed to study the macro level issues to understand the availability. Demand forecasting, it helps in exploring the requirement of manpower positions at a different point of time. The third point, planning and control of manpower. At this stage, the forecasts of manpower are translated into HR policies that encompasses all the HR related issues like recruitment, training and development. So to do HR planning, flexibility and interrelationship of all other policies also need to be considered. We must appreciate that manpower redundancy for a country like India, for example, or else in many developing countries in abroad, is not only for adequate business planning but also for inadequate human resource planning, which among others can be attributed to inflexible policies. As I said earlier, inflexible policies are in terms of redundancy, inflexible job description, inflexible employment conditions, absence of retraining and redeployment. The fourth point is called as the utilization, that is the final stage of human resource planning process. Success is measured in terms of achievement trends, both quantitatively and qualitatively. So in case of HR planning, the quantitative achievement can be visible through productivity trend, manpower costs, while qualitative achievement is a kind of subjective appraisal on achievement of organizational objectives. So reflection of qualitative achievement can also be studied in the context of prevailing industrial relations, level of motivations and morale, and so also the grievance patterns. Let me tell you that what is the time scale that we need to follow for human resource planning forecast. Suppose if your time frame is less than a year, then the requirement basis or the plan can be an operational plan. We can fix it in our annual budget. The availability need to be checked in terms of existing manpower by proper distribution of workload. Plus, we can think of deploying the contractual manpower. So the possible action plan to meet the requirements will be contractors, overtime, or recruitment on contractual terms, or restructuring and layoff. When the time frame is for a span of 1 to 2 years, then the requirement basis will be a business plan. We can forecast the budget or forward the budget. The availability will be the current manpower that you have minus the projected attrition. So the possible action plan can be transfer, promotion, new recruitment, restructuring, redundancy, training and development. If you go to a span of 2 to 5 years, then the requirement basis will stand as a long-term plan. Here, the availability will be the projected manpower, which includes the trainees who are actually being inducted in your organization during the training period. So the possible action plan for them can be a succession plan. You can go for recruiting such people, you can go for training and developing them, or restructuring. If our time frame is for more than 5 years, then the requirement basis can be a perspective plan. The availability of manpower in such a place will be the labor market, the education system. So the possible action plan to meet the requirement can be succession plan or management development we can do internally, organizational development we can take care, redeployment we can think about it, or job restructuring. If you go for analyzing the workloads for such plans or to forecast the manpower requirement at the different point of time that we have discussed just before, the workload analysis is extremely important, because analysis of the present and future workload depends on the possibility of how we are quantifying the work content in every area of an organizational activity. So some of the steps that will help you to do a workload analysis. Number 1, classification of work. Classification of work is done by identifying the work or job content and time requirement for such job or a work unit. Time requirement analysis for each job component can be done by deciding the standard time and by the usage of the technique that is called as the work measurement technique. There are certain limitations of job or work content analysis. One of the first reason will be all jobs are not strictly quantifiable. Deciding the standard time of jobs scientifically requires a rigorous time study, which is not only costly but also time consuming. Secondly, the normal fatigue allowance is not considered because this is developing such time requirement. However, during the process of developing the standard time through time study, this kind of problem can be addressed. Thirdly, when there is a technological change is happening, then obviously standard time required also may get varied. That means we need to set the job time at one point of time which may not be hold good subsequently. The second analysis of workload factor is called as forecasting the number of jobs. So after we classify the job and work content and its time requirement, the next phase is called as workload analysis. Job forecasting in quantitative term for a number of job is done for a time period is called as forecasting the number of jobs, and this is being done based on the demand projections. The third point, converting the projected job into man hours. When we multiply the time requirement of each job with the number of projected jobs, then the man hours for the job gets computed. Fourth point, converting the man hours into manpower requirements. That is the final phase of workload analysis, where you can do an aggregate man hour calculations, you can do it, and that can be converted into manpower requirement. But when we do all that, we need to consider the leave reserves, normal fatigue allowance, etc. When we spoke about the workload factors, I feel like let us compute the workload factor to assess the manpower requirement. For example, there is a maintenance department of Delhi Vidyut Board which needs to attend the customer complaint on an ongoing basis. Based on the analysis of the customer complaint, which is primarily onto maintenance job, the classification of work for Delhi Vidyut Board can be grouped into 4 categories. For example, one of the categories is called related to meters. Related to meters, the hours required to do the job is, for example, 0.75. Related to installing them, related to installations should be. So it will be 2.5 hours, for example, per job. When you are maintaining it, that is like related to maintenance. The requirement, the hour requirement for the job is 1.5. Similarly, related to attending the emergency call, so we have reserved 1.10 hours per job. So now, if we'll see the slide itself over here, the forecast of job in a day of different years, for example, in a span of 4 years from 2002 to 5, you can see for meters, it is 2002, it is 15, 2003, 13, 2004, 11, 2005, 8. Similarly, installations, you may find out that 2002, 85, 2003, 95, 2004, 110, 2005, 125. Maintenance, it will be 27, 2002, 35, 2003, 41 in 2004, 45 in 2005. Similarly, in case of emergency, 2002, 10, 2003, 8, 2004, 6, 2005, 4. So now over here, when you are doing it, what we need to do is, we have to take out the rates, the hours per job multiplied by the number of hours being spent. So each of the year, we can compute that how much of man hour that is required. And when we get everything together, so for a year, say for example 2002, if we add how much of hour we have invested for meters, installation, maintenance and emergency, you can get the total man hours required per day. And it goes on and on. You can see 2003, there is a man hour being calculated, that is 308.55, 2004, 351.35, 2005, 390.40. So now, when we got the man hours, now we need to convert the man hours into manpower requirement per day. So this is done considering the skills interchangeability of maintenance staff for the identified job categories with 20% of fatigue allowance and 20% of leave reserves. Therefore, in a given day of 8 man hours per employee, the net availability time for attending the customer complaint get reduced by 40% per employee. That is 4.8 man hours per day, because each of the man hours, if it is 8 hours, then 8 hours multiplied by 40% equal to minus 3.2 hours, which comes as 4.8 man hours. Now what you can do, we can do a forecast of manpower considering the 4.8 man hours per employee per day for different year. And when we compute, in your slide you can see that in each of the year how many employees are required. You can see in 2002 we require 57, 2003 64, 2004 73 and 2005 84. So this is the way we can compute the workload factors. Now let's talk about what are the different quantitative tools that we use for manpower forecast. I think there are different ways we compute the quantitative trends of analyzing the manpower. One is called as the time series analysis. Employment data over a time period or time series are normally being used under this method as a basis for manpower forecast. There are 5 distinct elements that need to be observed while recording the employment levels over a time period. Number 1, trend. Fluctuations in level of employment that is generated over a time period. Number 2, cyclical effect. Change in employment in relation to some particular event like economic liberalization or World Trade Organization resolutions. Number 3, seasonality. Seasonal fluctuations normally occur more than once in a given time period, like requirement of more maintenance staff in Delhi Vidyut Board during summer and rainy season while less in winter. Step, that is number 4 step. This is a sudden change in employment level due to economic environment or increased market share or procurement of new machines, etc. Number 5, random fluctuations. There are fluctuations happens in employment level which are basically random in nature. That is, such fluctuations do not follow any obvious pattern. Let me talk about the moving average method that is used in understanding the quantitative tools for HR planning. The moving average method is one of the methods that talks about average of the combined employment level data for the recent past, and that is used to forecast the employment level for the next period. This technique is useful to guard against random fluctuations. However, it requires careful selection of time period, which may be a 6 period or a 10 period or a 12 period moving average. If time period is chosen are too few, we may get a wide variability in our forecast. Therefore, considering more time period provides better results. In this context, let us compute forecasting the manpower requirement. For example, a company like Godrej has the following manpower data. You can see in our slide, which is created for their healthcare division for the past 6 years, ranging from 1995 to 2000, wherein you will find out the number of manpower level data. So if you are asked to forecast their manpower requirement, because they have given the data from 95 to 2000 and they are asking to forecast the manpower requirement in 2001 using a 6-year period moving average. So over here, what you need to do is you need to compute the functions of the total manpower level data. I think all the data you need to add it and divide by the number of years. I think the number of years we are using is 6. So if you are asked to use 4 period moving average to forecast the manpower of 2001, then we require to drop the data of 1995 and 96 to compute the forecasted manpower requirement. So if you'll add it up, I think 2 data we are eliminating, that is a 500 and 600. Then if you are adding it up and dividing it by the number of years, we get a figure of 1050. From the above variation in results, we can well understand the danger of considering the lesser time period for manpower forecasting. Therefore, for achieving better results, weights you can assign for different time period at the discretion of the analyst. For example, manpower level of 95, 96 and 97, as it is old, may be less relevant, but for the years, weights may be assigned as 1 each for them. For 98, we can give a weightage of 2, 99, 3, 2000 as weightage of 4. Now if you forecast it, you will see in the slide, you will be finding out a recent manpower projection, that is 1033. This is one method. There is the next method which is called as an exponential smoothing. In moving average method, we need to carry forward a large volume of historical data, while in exponential smoothing, we can eliminate the need for such past records. This method basically smoothens the random error by giving exponentially decreasing weights to historical data. And the weight factors over here is indicated by alpha, which is a smoothing constant, a non-linear decimal value that is lying between 0 and 1. You need to remember there is the formula for exponential smoothing model that talks about the forecasted manpower equal to forecasted demand for the previous period, that is called FT minus 1, plus smoothing constant, that is alpha, multiplied by the actual manpower required for the previous period minus the forecasted demand for the previous period. So if you say, for example, if you are computing the forecasting the manpower requirement through exponential smoothing with an example, Suppose we assume that the forecasted manpower requirement for an organization was 500, while the actual requirement is 480. Suppose if we consider an alpha value of 0.4, what is the company? What is that company feel that it can produce best results? So here if we apply the formula that is called as FM equal to FT minus 1 plus alpha 80 minus 1 minus FT minus 1. Here FT minus 1 is called as the 500, while the actual requirement is 480, that is called 80 minus 1. The alpha value is 0.4. So if we put up in the formula itself, then we'll get 492. So this is what the company feels that they will be able to produce the best results. What is the difficulty in manpower forecast using quantitative tool? It is very important to understand that the productivity rise cannot always be attributable to increased human efforts. Thus, increase of productivity due to change in technology or the sum total of operational managerial efficiency are the factors that need to be integrated while doing the manpower forecast. But developing the manpower planning model, integrating the above two productivity variables is not so easy for obvious computational facilities. So it is difficult to get units of output in the same form for all jobs. For example, maintenance jobs are very difficult to quantify. Even with customer relationships management solutions, quantification is difficult. So uncertainty about the future is a major problem for the manpower planner. Therefore, extrapolating on past data may lead to a major inaccuracy in manpower estimations. So employee cannot always be related to output in a direct way. So therefore, human resource information system, it is said that human resource information system, which is called HRIS, may not exist in many organizations, and lack of such information support system may lead to inaccurate estimation of manpower. Therefore, managerial judgment is often considered as the best option for manpower planning. So as managerial judgment is one of the best options, we need to lead on to another model for managerial judgment, that's called as a qualitative model. Qualitative model is carried out by different techniques, and one of the important technique is called as DELPHI technique. The word Delphi has come from Greek because that was a convention to consult an oracle representative of god Apollo, who was believed to have contacts with God. In modern times, this method is essentially a group process to achieve a consensus forecast. Let's talk about what are the steps that DELPHI technique use. Number one, to start with it requires selection of a coordinator and a panel of experts both within or outside the organization. The coordinator then circulates in writing to such experts. The third point will be the experts then write their observation. The fourth one is the coordinator then edits those observations and summarizes, however disclosing the majority opinion in his summary. The fifth point is on the basis of his summary, the coordinator then develops a new set of questionnaire and then circulates those among experts. The sixth one is the experts then answer such new sets of questions. And the seventh one is the coordinator repeats the same process till he is able to synthesize from the opinion of experts. There is another method that is being followed in qualitative method of data forecasting, is called as the nominal group method. Nominal group method also involves a panel of experts like DELPHI. However, the major difference between DELPHI and the nominal group method is that under DELPHI under the DELPHI technique, experts are not allowed to discuss among themselves for assessing the questions. Under nominal group method, experts are given the opportunity to discuss among themselves. Under this method, the coordinator assumes the role of a facilitator, allowing the expert to sit together to discuss their ideas and records such discussions, which is made on a flip chart. So after this roundtable discussion on ideas, experts are asked to rank their ideas according to their perceived priority. And after that, the group consensus is derived mathematically in terms of individual ranking. The process therefore affords creativity and facilitates scientific group consensus Unlike consensus by qualification. Qualification means as the coordinator ultimately decides the best course of action under the DELPHI technique. Let us talk about how to analyze the manpower supply. One of the ways the manpower supply is being carried out is through wastage analysis. Manpower wastage is an element of labor turnover. Wastage is severance from the organization that includes voluntary retirement, normal retirement, resignation, death and dismissal. Recruitment decisions without wastage analysis may lead to an inaccuracy in human resource planning. Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, United Kingdom, suggested wastage analysis curve can be identified using 3 different phases. Number 1, during induction phase, marginal employees may leave. Number 2, during differential transit period, an employee learns about the organization and identifies his role on it. Number 3, while during the period of settled connection, an employee settles down and decides to stay. So it is observed that wastage decreases with the increase in length of services. Wastage also you can find out also decreases with the increased skill exercise and age of employees. Let's talk about what are the different methods that is used on wastage analysis. Number 1 is labor turnover index. This index indicates the number of leavers as percentage to average number of employees. So average number of employees employed in a given time period is decided by adding the employee at the beginning and end and then dividing them the same by 2. Suppose let us compute a labor turnover index. Suppose at the beginning of a year, an organization has 250 employees, while at the end they got 230. Assuming no recruitment has been made, then if the question asks that to compute the labor turnover, then what we need to do is the number of people those are leaving, that is like 250 minus 230 equal to 20. The average number of employees employed equal to called 250 plus 230 divided by 2 equal to 240. And when you are doing labor turnover, then it will be number of employees leaving divided by average number of employees employed multiplied by 100. So 20 divided by 240 multiplied by 100 equal to 8.33%. Suppose 5 employees have been recruited in between the year, then the labor turnover will be the number leaving, like 250 plus 5 minus 230 equal to 25, whereas average number of employees employed will be 255 plus 230 divided by 2 equal to 242.5, which can be rounded to 243, and the labor turnover will be 25 divided by 243 multiplied by 100 equal to 10%. Let's talk about what are the different methods of wastage analysis. One is called as a stability index. This index basically indicates stable workforce for a given period and can be computed like number with more than 1 year of service with us now in the employees now divided by total employed 1 year ago multiplied by 100. Number 2 is called as a cohort analysis. Cohort means homogeneous group. So cohort analysis takes into account the length of service. That is an important variable of wastage analysis. That means we need to eliminate the defects of labor turnover index. So cohort analysis is more accurate for a small homogeneous group. The third step is called as census analysis. One of the major deficiencies of cohort analysis is that it holds good for a small homogeneous group. So census analysis can eliminate this problem, taking into account a cross section of the organization, that is all the age, specific wastage rates at a given time, and applying a smoothing algorithm to the resulting data to identify a general pattern. So census analysis requires 3 sets of data, like the number of employees at the beginning of the census, the number of employees at the end of the census, and the number of employees during the census period. Let's talk about HR replacement analysis. That is called as the replacement theory and staff replacement. A replacement is called for whenever new equipment offers more efficient or economical service than the old existing one. For example, the old equipment may fail and work no more, or is worn out and needs high expenditure on its maintenance. The problem in such situation is to determine the best policy to be adopted with respect to replacement of the equipment. The replacement theory provides answers to this question in terms of optimal replacement period. We need to consider the question of replacement in respect of replacement of staff of an organization, which diminishes gradually due to death, retirement, retrenchment, and other varied reasons. So for planning a suitable recruitment policy, historical data are collected to estimate the likely stay of individual with the organization through a period of time. So that is the way we carry out the replacement theory and staff replacement. While ending up, let me talk about the Markov analysis. I think Markov analysis is one of the methods that many organizations use to compute their HR planning. It basically estimates the internal supply, which involves much more than simply calculating the number of employees. Many firms are using the Markov analysis technique to track the pattern of employee movements to various jobs and develop a transitional probability matrix for forecasting internal supply by specific categories such as position and gender. Let me share you a slide over here. You can find out there is a transition between 2013 to 14. You'll find that there were 35 employees in the 4-person occupation in 2013. Out of these 82% means 28 employees are expected to remain in that position next year based on the past levels of activity. The organization over here can anticipate that 8% of the 4-person population, that means 3 out of 35 in 2013, can be promotable to the role of plant manager. So in addition, the past trend shows that 10% of employees at this level are lost to turnover, who are expected to leave the organization. Added to it, out of 110 team leaders, the level below, 11%, that is the 12 employees, you can find out over here, 12 employees would be eligible for promotion to a 4-person position. Therefore, next year's projected supply of 4-person would be 28 from this year who are projected to stay in that role, plus the 12 team leaders who are projected to be eligible for promotion over the year, for a total supply of 44 persons. So friends, therefore, in this session, we have studied about the process outline that is followed in HR, the different time scales of HR forecasts, the workload factor analysis, the different quantitative tools for manpower forecasts. We have also spoken about different qualitative models for better management decisions, judgments, and also we have touched about the different analysis of manpower supply, primarily the manpower wastage analysis, and finally we spoke about the HR replacement analysis and the Markov analysis. So this is all about your human resource planning process in a gist. Thank you so much.